Welcome back to the Working Audio Tools podcast, where we deconstruct the mysteries of the audio world, in particular mixing, but with mastering and recording techniques around that as well. So picking the brains of celebrity YouTubers and high in the industry, well-known mixing engineers along the way. This week we are going to talk about something that is close to Paul's heart. I can feel he's been banging at my phone all week about this, and I could tell he was bursting to talk about
rabbit holes
after some of the comments.
Autistic rabbit holes.
Oh yeah, rabbit holes are a big theme behind the scenes in this podcast with ourselves and one or two individuals that we know, and we do like to dive down tech nerdy rabbit holes. But in response to some of the comments we had on the last mix battle that we did, Paul has decided to open the floor up to some investigation of some further topics. Paul, take it away.
When I was going through the comments of the kind of the mix comparison that we had on Saturday's upload,
Deleting all the ones that preferred my mix. No, we don't.
Did you notice that? Crap. Fuck, I have to get a little bit more subtle. Take them one comment maybe every couple of days. I was looking at it. And what I found like really interesting, and it's my favourite term, my favourite phrase. If you go through me and Ed's voice notes, you'll just hear me starting a conversation with, you know what, I found this quite interesting. But when I was going through them, I noticed, wow, the perception is so varied. Like it was an average really. Like the comments were an average in itself, and what I took the kind of conclusion was, yeah, both mixes are great. That's really all I cared about. But I thought I would go through the comments and kind of think about like referencing, right, in terms of like translation. Now, translation is something that me and Ed are now having to think a lot about. Me and Ed have taken time to just get our mixes to a point where we're like, yeah, we can put them out to the world and we know that they're good mixes, right? We know. Again, there'll be little tweaks and I think the thing is with the internet, as soon as you give somebody something, they're like, oh, well, I've got to say something. I can't just say it's good. I've got to, like, you do the podcast, and I've got to look at it and critique it, and before you know it, they're hyper critiquing stuff. And at the end of the day, they're like, yeah, but both mixes both sound great. I'm like, right, okay, that's all that matters. So just to kind of give you an idea in terms of like how you can never keep the internet happy, I'm going to read these now. I've got them on my phone, and I'm just going to overgeneralize because some of these comments are pretty long. I don't want to bore you, right? Okay, let's start. So Ed's drums and vocals are better to my ears, but Paul nailed the guitars and the lifts needed to keep the song interesting throughout. So Ed's vocals are better. And then the next guy says, Paul nailed the country vocal sound in my opinion. Really like Ed's drum sound too. Next one's basically saying Ed has got a better tonal balance, but my one has better impact. Next one says, again, kind of agrees with the vocals a little bit, but doesn't really impact the whole mix. It's a really long one, basically saying that my mix makes him bob his head and stuff like that, but Ed's mix is technically better in terms of balance. To my liking, again, on Paul's mix, I feel the snare is a bit pokey, but a really nice and balanced mix. I didn't really hear the vocal issue. PT all the way out, but both were fantastic in their own ways. Both of them are good mixes. Seems to me, I don't get this one. I want to get Ed's opinion on this, to what he thinks this. I want to get his reaction. It sounds to me like Ed's mix is a Spotify sound, and Paul's is a Tidal Max. Paul's snare steals my attention, feel like it's too high a crack. It should be felt deeper. It's like, I'd like to hear Ed's vocal louder, 1 dB at times, both very listenable mixes, well done. How do you perceive that? Like, one sounds like Spotify and one sounds like Tidal Max.
I assumed he was getting at the dynamic contrast and range between the instruments within the tracks. Mine's quite a forward, I don't want to say squashed, but it's forward and, quite a few elements of the song are forward in the mix. The drums, the bass, the guitars are forward but wide. So maybe it's a file,
like compression thing, because I know Spotify compresses a little bit more. Paul's mix with vocals I thought were a little bit too loud. If you take Paul's high end, Ed's low end, and meet in the middle, the vocal for the vocals, it'd be perfect. Thought Ed's mix was a little bit scooped. You get some people that go really, really like. I think we hyper critique some of our own mixes, but like some of the comments here go fucking so deep. Ed mix is a little bit more balanced. Paul's is a little bit too mid/high, mid forward, which wasn't my preference. Ed's kick stands out, but I like Paul's snare a bit more. What's interesting with that is that the amount of times that people were like, yeah, like, I like Paul's vocal. No, but I like Ed's vocal. And then it's like, oh, I like Ed's snare better. No, I like Paul's snare better. Yeah, no, Paul's mix vocal sits right in the mix. Actually, it's too loud. Actually, I hear this and I hear that. And then some people are like, I like the depth Paul's got. I like the width Paul's got. Actually, no, I think Ed's mix is like way more tonally balanced. No, and do you not, when you build a picture, you build this picture that, and I mean this, right, in all love, but you can't trust the internet for like judgment on your mixes, because what this shows is that everybody hears things differently. Everybody's got different setups. So like in this world of like the internet, and if you're stuck in this and you're like, you know, putting your mixes out for the internet to critique, I know people on forums do a lot like that. Like, how do you go about actually getting mixes that translate well to the point where you could just go, know what, right, that's done, move on. So if we think about translation, Ed, would you say, like, in terms of a percentage, what would you say you mix? Would you say you mix 90% on headphones, or is it a little bit less? What would you say your percentage between speakers and headphones is at the moment?
80 to 90% speakers.
So how do you feel that your mixes have been translating to headphones? Is it something that you check a lot, or is it something that you just do a very like quick check and just be like, I don't care, I trust my PSIs more than anything?
I got to a point where I was pretty happy with the PSIs. The translation from the PSIs from the Neumanns was immediately better.
Yeah, even I noticed it. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, once I'd got used to the low end. Bringing the subs into the room added another element. Sorry, it wasn't a problem. But weirdly, I'd have more sub in the system, which I can adjust in Trinov, and I'd be putting too much bass in the mixers. I lower the bass in the system, and I put the right amount of bass in the mixers. That makes no sense to me. Feel free to comment about that. But I am going through, listening through my topping DAC and headphone amp with my Sennheiser HD490s and Neumann NDH30s, and I hear different things on both. I feel the Neumanns are better for low end. The Sennheisers are better for critical listening and details, but they highlight level differences a bit better than the Neumanns. The Neumanns are quite safe. They are very much like the speakers. Now, if you followed my channel, you'll know that I sold my Neumann speakers. I couldn't stand them eventually, but I actually really like the headphones because they do what the speakers were doing, but without the room influences, which were further causing me to dislike the Neumanns. They just didn't work for me in my room. They're great speakers. Don't misinterpret that as Ed thinks Neumanns are shit like some people do on the video. That's not what I fucking said. What I said was they're not right for me in my room. So translation-wise, yeah, I've been doing a mix this afternoon and I've gone through on both sets of headphones, had a thorough listen. I'm listening out for different things. On the Sennheisers, I'm listening for reverb tails, transient articulation, because I feel that those things are a bit flat and I don't say lifeless, but there's less energy in the Neumanns, but then the Neumanns give me a good idea of overall translation onto what I'd say is average systems, because things don't really poke out on them, but also things are flat, as you and I have discussed at length this week. If things do sound flat, they're really flat on the Neumanns, and as this is why we believe, or Paul believes at least, correct me if I'm wrong, that people like Spike Stent are mixing on Neumann 120s and our friend M mixes on Neumanns because they are boring speakers.
Yeah. And as
so
well,
if you can get energy into a mix on those, you're smashing it everywhere else.
Yeah, and that's something that when I found that out, I was like, because I already knew that Spike was on KRKs for, for over a decade. Like there's a good recent photo, must have been before he got the Neumanns, where he had, and I spoke to Ed about this because he's actually heard them, and he had the old KRKs. Now, when we say KRKs, many of you will think, oh, rockets. We all know rockets sound shit. Rockets sound shit, man. I had
my first pair. Cheers.
I had Rocket 5s, Rocket 6s, and then I had Rocket 8s, and they were all fucking shit. But before they released the Rockets, Spikes were...
The G series? The V series is the replacement of the G series, I think.
Yeah, I think it's
the G series looked like square concrete blocks with a speaker in.
No, what was
it?
I think it was,
than that,
there were 8,000, 9,000s.
That's the one.
They were KRK 9,000, so they were 9-inch speakers.
The joys of editing would suggest we could look this up and then tell everyone, but...
Yeah, but it is what it is, right? Fuck it, I'm too lazy. But you had loads of KRK speakers, and when I was going through, a book, would you believe it? A fucking audio book. I didn't go in the Google. I was going through the Mixing Engineer's Handbook, and I kept on noticing quite a pattern when I was going through the interviews, and a lot of them were talking about KRKs, which were obviously, and I know this was before the rockets, and they were saying, yeah, I've recently kind of been using KRKs because they translate really well to home systems. Now, I'm making a video this week that will already be out when you watch this, and it's about why KRKs are pointless for solely mixing on, right? If you're starting out on mixing, the worst thing you could do is go on KRKs. There's not KRKs, NS10s. It's the worst thing you could do. And again, you can watch that video, but I think
look forward to the controversy that causes, Paul.
I love it.
Paul's back
I love
to
it.
himself.
I'm back to myself.
Picking on the biggest brands in audio.
Fuck yes. But I think, what I've noticed is that mixers are leaning more on neutrality. So again, KRKs. And now, Ed, what was it you told me about the 9000s when you heard them? I can't remember what studio you were in, but you gave me your opinion on what you heard.
I was in Angelic Studios, which is the
Peter
former...
Gabriel's?
No, that's Real World Studios.
Oh,
Angelic
okay, yeah.
is the former Jamiroquai guitar player who who built it but sadly passed away. But the studio lives on, courtesy of his wife. And yeah, they're in the main control room there, and they sound great. They are very neutral sounding, I think. I mean, we were only listening to tracking through them really, so I didn't get much of a chance to listen to any, fully processed, mixed and mastered audio. But yeah, slightly different. Most studios have ATCs for tracking in, and you can hear they're all mid-range. But they have a similar level of detail in the mid-range, maybe not quite as forward in the mid-range, but yeah, enough low end and enough clarity in the top end, but they're not exciting, they're not fatiguing. Yeah, it was only a brief experience, so maybe other people who have more experience on them can comment.
But I think one thing that I did notice was when I had then done my rabbit hole and dived deeper, I started then going into other mixers. Now, it's interesting, I love this phrase, but Ed hates the barefoots. But then you get somebody like Manny Marroquin who raves about barefoots. And I know Spike has a pair of barefoots. I don't know if he still has them, but he did have them at one point. And what was interesting with Manny was Manny said that they're not the prettiest sounding speakers, but they're not completely raw sounding. And that got me sitting back thinking, these guys aren't really looking for perfect detail. They're looking for translation. And then that got me thinking about Ed's setup. Now, obviously, I've been in London, I've been in the room, and I've heard Ed's speakers, and they do sound phenomenal. The mid-range detail is incredible. But when I was speaking to Ed this week, I was thinking, to my ears on the headphones, on my setup, I was thinking that the mix maybe sounded a bit safe to my ears. Many people commented that Ed's mix was tonally balanced, and I 100% agree. What Ed done really well was created such a balanced mix that probably would just be a mastering engineer giving it a bit of a lift. It was to my ears, it was very, very neutral. But then my thought was, if the average consumer is listening to mostly neutral systems and they don't have that level of detail in the mid-range, then are they going to maybe perceive mixes that are done on super, super, super high quality detailed speakers as possibly maybe, I don't want to say dull sounding because Ed's mix doesn't sound dull, but it lacks maybe a bit of the excitement that can maybe come by kind of pushing the mid-range a little bit. And then that's when I was speaking to Ed about, well, are you maybe thinking about getting another set of monitors, maybe a cheaper pair of monitors where you can just kind of go quickly and go, right, I know what the PSIs are giving me, I know I can trust it, because they have definitely improved Ed's mixes. Anybody that says they haven't, then fucking, sorry, but test your ears. I'm sorry. But I do think that having as many different references as possible for translation is really important, because I looked at all of these mixers that I look up to, and I'm like, they've got at least 3 or 4 speakers in the room. Yes, they were using NS10s, but it was like a secondary reference. NS10s were at a time where it was that was normally the sound of a hi-fi. But we're not in that world anymore. We're in a world of mostly Apple AirPods and headphones, and even Alexas have almost fucking kind of full range. You can get pretty decent bass out of an Alexa. Even Bluetooth speakers are sounding better every time. Phones are phones. Phones sound shit, right? But even the MacBook Pro speakers, when I tried the MacBook Pro speakers for the first time, I was like, holy shit. This sounds fucking pretty bassy. I was like, I've never heard this. They're the best laptop speakers I've ever heard. I couldn't believe it. But you get to a point where when you listen to your mix outside, and then you listen to it in the car, and you listen to it on shitty fucking laptop speakers, and you listen to it on your phone, there's always going to be something that you're going to miss. And there's always, and I think that's what the comments, and that's why I wanted to share them, was to show everybody listening that there is no such thing as a perfect mix. All you could do is fight with averages. That's really all you could do. So what I do is I mix with my £2,000 fucking HE1000 SEs from Hyphaman. Like, people wear these and they're like, my God, this sounds fucking phenomenal. This sound stage is crazy. But I don't get the transient detail from them. That's the thing with headphones. You either get the super wide soundstage or you lose the punch. Where when I go to the Hyphaman and Anda Nanos, I get the biggest detail I've ever heard. It's upfront detail. You could hear the spit, fucking the crack of fucking a vocal lip smacking. The transients are super fast. And you get all of this punch and slam. That's what I get from Odysseys. And then the two of them, I go between the two of them. And then I get to a point where I've got a good average between the two. And then I'll go to the Olos, the S5X, through real phones. Then I'll go through some of their things. I'll go through the smartphones and the kind of the mono cubes, which is like the Orotone. And then I'll listen for a bit in mono. And then I'll go to my own speakers. I've got the Kali ultra near fields, like the satellites with the bass unit. And I'll kind of go to that. But I know I don't do that enough. Like, see, on that last mix, I didn't reference half of what I knew I should have because I was like in a hurry. And the more I think about it, like, I shouldn't have done that. I should have just taken the time, because it only genuinely takes you fucking half an hour, really. If you have all your like your different references and you just kind of go through them all, it's all about just thinking about little details. Have your setup that you know you can trust. For Ed, it's the PSIs. For me, it's the HE1000 SEs. That's like my main 80% of the mix gets done there. And then all you're doing is you're just trying to get references that you know you can trust, and kind of having an idea of what pro mixes or mixes you want to reference sound like on these speakers and certain characteristics that they have. And hopefully, what I'd like to think is that when you get the right setup and the right references, and you know how to reference and what to look for, you'll end up with a pretty good average. And I would probably say that that's what I find pro mixes really do have. If I listen to a Spike or Serban mix, it sounds fucking great no matter what I play it on. I don't know about you, Ed, but like in terms of like Spike mixes and maybe Serban mixes, but do you find that like their translation is normally like superb, or do you find that there's maybe some places that you listen to mixes but it's like it doesn't matter what you listen to it on, it's just going to sound pretty shitty?
Yeah, all those guys sound amazing, and that's one thing that struck me about Bob Clearmountain. Didn't matter what the song, what the source, what the sound system was. It sounded great regardless. And I remember listening to mixes and masters from, my old original band days, not done by anyone particularly named in the industry. And they wouldn't translate on different systems, and I never understood why. And I was like, but we're paying someone who we've been told is good, yet these things aren't sounding as good or as loud. And this is long before I was into mixing myself, so I didn't know what an LUFS was from an RMS, and I didn't have a clue. But it was always frustrating. And now knowing all those details in a lot more detail and starting to get my head around them, and how much they're influencing my mixing journey and how much I need to get my head around them, I now can admire the guys like Serban and Spike and Bob Clearmountain for just how good their mixing is. Now, mastering does play a part in translation as well.
100%.
I think, because there are things you can miss in a mix that a mastering engineer will pick up on, hopefully. That's one reason I would always advocate using a third-party mastering engineer, but I'm aware the practicalities are a lot of clients want both a one-stop shop. So I'm about to learn mastering myself. That's one of my next dominoes to get in.
Right, another
after
rabbit
learning
hole.
Pro Tools. Not necessarily because I want to promote myself as a mastering engineer and try and make some more money. I want to understand how my mixing affects mastering and get better at it and really refine my ears, which, mastering, you're talking very small EQ changes, aren't you? Hopefully.
Hopefully.
If the mix is decent. So, I admire those guys for what they can do. Hey there, Ed here. You may recognise my voice from doing all the other DistroKid advert segments. This time I didn't want to just do a typical advert talking about stuff to do with DistroKid. I actually wanted to give you my feedback about the service because I genuinely do use DistroKid for uploading my music. And I know Paul does, and it turns out Dan Worrell does as well. I've used DistroKid since 2019. As you can see on the screen, I have 6 releases so far. It is genuinely super easy to use. The tracks get into Spotify within 24 hours, which is remarkable. Apple Music takes a little bit longer. I'd suggest giving that 10 to 14 days. The hyperfollow links are really useful for advanced promotion of your tracks, and the promo cards are really great visual aids for social media promotion. Ooh, I particularly like that one. DistroKid collect all the royalties from your streaming services, and here you can find an itemized breakdown of where all your income has come from. There's also a DistroKid referral where you can save your friends $10 per sign-up by creating your own VIP referral link. The translation thing's interesting because we all know about the car stereo.
Yes, I'm sure.
Magic in the mid-range, as Colt Caparoon said in the video, is very true. That is a great video. But even guys like M, who Paul and I know, who's worked with P. Diddy, Drake, Chipmunk, Wiley... The list of people he's worked with is amazing. He's just got a Grammy with Kaz Is Dead.
Well, Brit Award, sorry.
Brit Award, yeah, just last week. Congratulations. He is also still now, and he's got, I think is it 9 or 10 number ones? Multiple platinum records around his studio, and he says most of them are at his mum's house. They're not even in the studio for political reasons. He's a well-decorated, successful mix engineer. He's going to festivals and clubs and bars and listening to how his songs are translating, and if something picks his ear up, it annoys him. And he is OCD enough to go back into the mix, figure out what he was doing at the time, and try and analyse why that snare drum was 0.25 dB too loud at 1K, and why he didn't pick that up at the time. And then he'll go through his 37 different sets of headphones and 20k headphone amp
system. The Pokedex
and
of headphones. I said that to him this week. I was like,
100 grand's worth of speakers.
You're the only guy that has fucking. I think at one point he had Susvara. He's got the new. I think it's the new Odysseys, and then it was the Dan Clark Stealth as well. They're like $5,500.
Incredible.
I'm like, I really want to hear them. Like I really badly want to hear them.
And his Chord Electronics Dave headphone amp it's the one. It's incredible. So he is still, we would regard him as kind of, he's a mentor to both of us. We would probably regard him as, up there with Spike and those guys for sure, easily. And he's still concerned with his mix translation. And we asked him on the podcast, if you haven't watched the interview with him, it is a great episode. He's an awesome dude. It's very funny. He talks about it as well and goes into depth, and it's fascinating that even on that level, still 20 years into the business, people are still checking mix translation. It is important. It's difficult. Now, the comment that got me, everyone had said, tonally balanced mix on mine, and then someone said it sounds scooped, and I was thinking, hang on, this must be the odd comment out because
I know what you mean.
9 other people have said it was balanced. Ozone mastering assistant told me it was pretty balanced. And that's all
No, it's funny. I said the same to me. Like when I looked at mine, I was like, "Wow, this is the best I've ever got it to the target curve." But mine's does sound different to yours. But
there's the default 2 dB shelf from 10K, and a 1 dB cut or shelf from 100 hertz down, or even 40 hertz down. It just does that by default, it seems. But that's the ultimate test for me. But that is a good test to get you in the ballpark. But like anything, I'd say it's a tool. Don't rely on it. I've gone 100%, crazy, been like, right, I've just raised the bass guitar by half or 1 dB, and now Ozone's telling me it needs 5 dB in the top end, and it's cutting out 7 dB in the low end. It's like, no.
Do you not use the other one? I use the tonal balance control. No, like the one that's got like that kind of, you go through the genre. It's got a line. I use that one. I don't use the assistant. I use the tonal balance thing more than anything.
I have a brief look at that, but I also find the assistant quite useful as a reference tool of, okay, maybe I've overlooked this, and then I'll listen to other reference mixes and refresh my ears at that point and go down that whole cycle. What I need to do is get onto the Dear VR software that comes with the Sennheiser HD 490s, which has their own correction to Harman curve. and crossfeed,
Crosstalk,
crosstalk, sorry, which is interesting and really useful. It does help with headphones, I feel, but you got to use it with caution. Too much of it sounds weird. Just enough of it is about right. But I was literally thinking about this today, Paul. Going through those, I must have done this mix today. Must have been 80-20 speakers, and at the end of the 20% on the headphones, I was like, nah, I'm a speakers guy. Can't get away from it. I would like another set of speakers, and now I've learnt Spike uses Neumann's again. If I'd known that, I may not have sold my Neumann's, I have to admit. But I may have an alternative coming on the way. We'll see.
Basically, what me and Ed are kind of trying to say to everybody is, I know that it's difficult money-wise, right? And it's easy for us as YouTubers and content creators that, again, we can't. However, Ed paid fucking, I'm not going to tell you how much, but he paid a fucking shit ton for those PSIs. Like the Kalis I didn't pay for, right? The Kali INUNF, I didn't pay that, right? I got them. I'm getting PreSonus Eris Studio 8s for like, sorry, because I like the fact I've got the ultra near fields, but I want proper near fields. And then I've got obviously these that I didn't pay for, the Hyphamans I didn't pay for. So I'm very fortunate, and I understand that. And again, I've got real phones, and I've got. However, I did buy Goodhertz can opener. I use that for my crosstalk, but I didn't pay for real phones. And I understand that'd be like, Paul, fucking, that's great for you guys. But if you want to treat this as a career, right, and you genuinely do take or again, you're a musician, you want to mix your songs to be as best as they can physically be, you need to invest. You need to invest in monitoring. You need to invest in options, but you need to understand the why. Like, I think many people buy NS10s and don't understand why. Like, the thing is with these guys that had NS10s, they understood the sound of them. And then normally they had tannoys, or most of the time they had big fucking massive tannoys behind them in the walls. So they had their mains. So they always had something to reference. And again, lots of guys still might have had like a mono Auto-Tone, because normally they used that for their FM radio translation. I just think it's important to, again, get one setup. My advice would be get a flat kind of neutral setup, right? And then get the mix of something as good as you can on that. And then try and find different references or kind of tools that you could use for translation that help you get like a certain translation for a certain kind of source. Because look, you can't listen to every TV, you can't listen to every Bluetooth speaker, you can't listen in every car, you can't listen to every phone, you can't listen to every laptop, you can't listen to every headphone. It's impossible. But I think all you could try and do is try and find averages, and I think that's what many mixers have done over the years, is they've got certain translation tools that have certain sims that allow them to have certain translation. So again, it might be a Bluetooth speaker that you find that you're like, oh, that kind of roughly sounds like when I'm in my house and I'm listening to Alexa, or it's like, oh, even my TV is, it kind of sounds kind of roughly like what the TV sounds like. You pick a translation tool that can cover a lot of bases. And the hard thing that I'm finding is trying not to focus too much, because you can get distracted very easily, where you've got your mix sounding the way you want it, and you're like, oh, but it's not sounding right there. So I'll tweak that to fix that. But now it doesn't sound right on the originals. And then if you have all of these different kind of tools, then before you know it, you can find yourself lost very quickly.
And this is something Tim Palmer talked about when we interviewed him. He said, why are you worrying about half a decibel in level here and there? It's going to sound different. It's going to be a dB louder on one speaker and a dB lower on another speaker. Doesn't matter. I mean, it does, because we're perfectionists, so we want as close as possible. It's one of those things. I've almost considered buying an Alexa as well, because I've heard my music on Alexas and it highlights something different to my Anchor Soundcore, which is a £40 portable Bluetooth speaker that lives in front of me and is currently my second set of speakers. But things like Alexas, for example, I played a mix to a friend of mine, and they said, "Oh, there's a bit too much bass," and I was like, "Where's the speaker?" "Oh, it's next to the wall." That's why there's loads of bass coming out of it. So that is a flaw in the Alexa system. Most of them are up against the kitchen wall.
Yep.
So they're using kind of surround sound design, whatever they're doing to create the size and the size and the space of the sounds that they get out of them, probably using the back wall and the likely proximity to a back wall. But maybe they need to work on that, because, they are resulting in too bassy mixes. So With the average person who doesn't understand that, though, you can tell them, but you just sound like you're making excuses. If things do sound scooped, like on the person who commented on the scooped mix, scoop sound and my mix, was listening on DT770 headphones. Now they're very like
scooped.
Beats headphones. There's loads of low end and they're scooped headphones. So my mix is going to sound scooped. Whereas if you've got more mid range, it might sound more neutral on those headphones. That's not to take anything away from his comment. We appreciate all comments. We do learn stuff. And, one of that comment actually did spark a debate this week, which has sparked this podcast episode, which has got us both very much thinking, well, maybe I need to lean more towards mid-range contents to counteract people listening on scooped headphones. Where is the middle ground? We need to get Bob Clearmountain on and ask him.
I think for me, the reason I mix with Harman EQ on all my headphones is so I don't have that, that tonal issue. Because at the end of the day, that I know that when I listen to Harman through all my headphones, I know I'm listening just to the characteristics that they have. So again, as I said, the HEs of the soundstage and the resolution, the Ananda Nanos have that just upfront detail and transient response. And it's the same reason why many people would sometimes use NS10s, because many people would really love the fast transient response of NS10s. But in modern day mixes, I do still see many people, with different forms of like translation. Like I'm even thinking about buying the Apple AirPods, because that seems to be something that's really, really, really popular just now. So if most of the audience are listening on like things like Apple AirPods, then really I should be listening to that, and I then should be referencing that, because it's like, look, we're all trying to fucking make a buck, and it's doesn't make it any easier when you have to buy loads of shit for translation. But if you treat this as a career, then it is something that you do need to think about. And even it annoys me when people will make comments on mixes and they're listening to they might have like mid-tier price speakers, but their room isn't treated, and they go, yeah, it's not an untreated room, but like these speakers are good. I'm like, wow, like that's why I mixed on headphones for so many years, because I knew that I didn't have a well-treated room. If you don't have a well-treated room, you're going to run into issues very, very fast. And if you have something, you can say, oh yeah, I just get SoundWorks. I'm like, if your room is that bad and it's doing constantly like more than 6 dB of like fixes, that's going to sound like a fucking mess, and you're not going to be able to trust. And again, the room is so important. Like I've spent so much money on that bloody Atmos room. I've then spent more money in here. I know that like the response measured in the INFs, the ultra near field, is like super, super flat. Like I'm so happy with it. And I know that I wouldn't be able to trust speakers unless my room was right. Now, many people, and I kind of agree with it. Some people say, yeah, you just learn it. Just learn your speakers. If you've got enough references, then that's all you need. I would disagree. If you have one set of speakers and a shitty sounding room, there's certain things that you just can't get. There's certain speakers that just can't give you the transient response. So you can get a certain representation, but if you can't hear the transient response, then you're not going to mix to that reference as close as you think that you are. Same with soundstage, and there's so many different things to mix in. There's so many different ways that people could hear mixes. And that's all I said to Ed this week was, I know those things, the PSIs. I shouldn't call them things, the amount of money's fucking spent on them, but get
they have feelings, Paul.
get Anthrax sent to my door from the PSIs themselves. But I did say to Ed, is there such a thing as a good thing? Is there too much of a good thing? Like, are you getting so much detail that it's maybe then impacting how you mix? Because I said to Ed that man is now talking about things he's never really talked about before, like distortion and phase. Like you tell me all the time, like, Paul, I could hear the slightest bit of distortion now. On the Neumanns, like, I would be like, I wouldn't even really hear it. Now I'm like, oh, I could hear it, but did you add a bit of distortion there? Oh, did you add a bit of distortion there? And even wee things like that, thinking if you're like, that sounds too distorted, you'll back it off. But if the average listener doesn't have that kind of detail, then again, it's just all about that balance. And so even as much as Ed has got a fantastic setup, he's even got Trinov, he's got the full shebang, it probably the best that I've heard speakers in a room. It's still one of these things where I'm still advising him, maybe it's best to maybe get like a cheaper speaker setup, maybe like reference a little bit more on headphones just to kind of give you a little bit more of a bigger picture. I think that's probably the best way to summarize it, is when you're mixing, you want the biggest picture possible. And I think as difficult as it is when you've spent so much money on your conversion and your speakers and expensive headphones and all the tools, to then think that fuck, I'm going to listen to my mix on Apple AirPods. It's just giving you a bigger picture of how music is going to be consumed over the world. And I think that's where me and Ed are just now, is trying to find that balance of having all the details that we can in front of us and then deciphering, right, how much of that detail do we kind of take into consideration and how much of the lower quality side of it do we let in? It's this balance, isn't it? And I think Ed's definitely on the right track for me, because the PSIs for me, there's nothing wrong with having a very, very well balanced track. There's nothing wrong. But I did think in my head that the vocal was a little bit buried in the mix a little bit. And then Ed thought my mix was too forward. And then I said to him today, probably as not as always, if you had a fucking balance, seems to be the Paul Third Ed Thorne thing. Fucking put the two of it in, it'd be the perfect balance. But then I sat and wondered if Ed maybe would have took a little bit more time on maybe the Neumanns, maybe that vocal would have been adjusted. And I remember he said a comment to me, I think it was like, I just always lean on the PSIs because I know I can trust them because they sound amazing and I've got all that detail. As audio engineers and music lovers, wanting to have the best sound that you can have, but at the same time thinking, I might have to make this maybe kind of downgrade it a little bit. Is that how you feel a little bit, that you're kind of having to downgrade a little bit by like going away from the PSIs and maybe listening on a lower quality system with less details?
No, I don't feel like it's a downgrade. What I feel about this is I would rather be able to hear every single detail, because there are systems that will reproduce every single detail. And Em mentioned festivals. If you go to a festival and they've got an L Acoustics PA system, who are at the moment, along with D&B, generally regarded as the best live sound speakers you can buy. They are astronomically expensive. I've worked on many systems on them doing live sound. The detail is my PSI is in a live sound speaker that can project a kilometre down the road and, produce 140 odd dB. They're immense. So the details I'm hearing will come out on those systems. Now, the argument I think you're putting out is, do you need that much detail if the average person isn't going to listen to it? Of course you don't. I would rather be aware of it. Now that, as we've discussed this week, the problem is, because I'm aware of so many details, I have been guilty of over-mixing. Mm-hmm. I've maybe used too much compression here and there, or cleaned things up too much, or someone alluded to possibly filtering things, EQing things too much so they had their own space, but at the detriment of the fullness of the sound. Maybe there is a temptation to over-mix, for sure, but I just think that's part of my journey. I would rather hear all the little bits of distortion and saturation, so I can choose to do what I want with them, rather than on the Neumanns, the 120 speakers I couldn't hear saturation and distortion unless it was in your face, and then you listen to it elsewhere and it's too much. It was difficult, but there's always that voice at the back of my head. Spike mixes on Neumanns, Spike mixes without room correction.
It's a puzzle piece, is it? You can put the puzzle pieces together and you're like,
Spike will go to a venue and put mattresses on the walls and that'll be his room correction. Come on. DistroKid sponsors the Working Audio Tools podcast, and 30% off your first year subscription can be found in the podcast show notes and the YouTube video description. Hyperfollow is the easiest way to place all of your content in one single place, making finding all of your content super easy for your audience. Upload artwork for your release, edit the information, and apply links to all of the streaming platforms your music is going to be available, which of course on DistroKid is potentially all of them that exist now and even in the future. Add social media buttons so your audience can find you and your latest music video. Creating a beautiful landing page with a preview of your music is easy with Hyperfollow. Hyperfollow links can be created for all of your releases, and it enables you to create pre-save links for your audience to pre-order your music before it's released. This link is shareable on all of your platforms and a great way to promote your next release, only with DistroKid.
Yeah.
Now, regarding room correction, we should talk about that because I think that's a huge part of translation. I was a huge advocate of Sound ID from Sonarworks for a long time. That has some interesting calibration profiles. They've measured and averaged many consumer devices, car speakers, different types of cars, you know, whether it's a saloon or a hatchback. It's very posh. Loads of different headphones, obviously, TV speakers, consumer devices, earpods, and so on, to give you an average that you can impose on your mix so you can effectively check the translation. It's not flawless, but it does get you in the right ballpark. That is a very useful tool, I think. I've got a video coming where I'm going to compare Sound ID with the new ARC software from IK Multimedia and the Neumann MA1 system, which I believe leans more towards the Fletcher Munson curve than flat. Obviously, speakers you don't mix to Harman, you mix to flat or Fletcher Munson.
Yeah, that's right.
Or the B and K curves. And Trinov. Now, once you've got Trinov, you'll hate it. I hated it to begin with. It sounded horrible. But everyone said, give it a week and trust it. It is right. And I now believe that it is right. And I couldn't go back to not having it. I don't think I'd really hate that.
I think...
But I do get the point about having different speakers that highlight different things, just as reference. What am I referencing on? PSIs. I don't bother with the van, to be honest. My Anchor Sound cores, 2 different sets of headphones, my phone through Mix to Mobile, which is a great app if you don't know that. And then my Apple, the old Apple earbuds used to get with the iPhones, the plug-in ones. So I reference on a fair bunch before it goes out. But I take Paul's point, and I think other people in the comments have said that my mixes sound a bit safe, possibly because I'm over-mixing because I hear everything, which is all part of my journey of development. I'm aware of it now. It's something else I'll consider. Yeah,
and I think it's good that you mentioned Sonarworks as well, because in terms of the Sound ID stuff, I only trust it now below 500 hertz and above like 10, 12K. Under 500 hertz, it does exactly what I want it to do. When I get Sonarworks working across the entire frequency spectrum, it's doing something phasey in the mids. The vocal feels like it's kind of sat back a little bit, and I've spoken to many people about it.
6 dB of correction, and it just sounds weird.
It does, yeah. So
and the headphone calibration profiles for me,
don't even get me started on that. They just sound weird. I've already done a video exactly why.
I know.
I debunked it. Well, not debunked it, but I went into the science of being like, this is why it doesn't make sense on headphones. But obviously, the last piece of the puzzle is to find references that you trust, that you know are good. And again, like being able to take the time. And I think that's sometimes what we don't have. And that's what I'll end this kind of discussion with, is stop being fucking lazy. Stop being lazy. Last week, I was lazy. I'll guarantee it, if I would have took a little bit more time to reference on real phones a little bit more, to take maybe a little bit more time on the UNFs. I just listened one pass through. If I took a little bit more time on some of the other references, and I listened to the phone speaker one because that's pretty good, and I listened to say like maybe the mono cubes and the NS10s that are in there, I probably would have got a little bit of a better representation. And don't know, some people said my vocal was like bang on level. Country stuff is pretty loud, but yeah, I didn't think of the genre when I did that. I just thought, like, I wasn't genre specific. I'm not going to lie. I just thought that was the right vocal level, where, I think I've got away with it because it's country. But if it was maybe something else, I wouldn't get away with it. And if I took in the time to be not as lazy, listen to the references, and I intentionally didn't listen to like actual references in terms of spike stent stuff. I normally do that.
You were saying you wanted to test where your ears were, didn't you?
And I'm pretty happy with where my ears ended up.
Yeah,
I think it's not.
Very good place if you didn't reference. Yeah,
but yeah, I think invest in your monitoring. If you're on speakers, invest in your room, invest in the treatment, and get the right correction software, and get it to do as little as physically possible. If you can't get the treatment, then again, move to headphones. That's my advice. Move to headphones and get good software that you trust. If you're going on headphones, there's videos that I've done on how to professionally do it on headphones. There is a method and a technique and a science behind it. But yeah, in the comments down below, let us know what you use for translation, how you get past the translation hump. Maybe some stories that you've had in the past where you've been like, yeah, this sounds amazing, and then it's been stuck on something. You're like, oh my God, can't believe that sounds horrible. And then you actually had a learning from that, and that worked. Again, let's share. This is all. I want to have more of these discussions where me and Ed are very open about things whilst we're on the journey, and we can have a unegotistical approach to things where there is no right or wrong answers. That's the thing about audio. It's all subjective. As the comments show you, it's so subjective. The first thing that goes through me and Ed's head is, what are you listening on? That's the first thing we think. We're like, have you listened to it on different setups and different systems? And that's the first thing that goes through our head. And sometimes it's just a case of like, they could have a great setup, but it's just their preference. But preference is one thing, translation is another. And if you want to do this professionally, all the best mixers have fucking amazing translation. It's something not to overthink, because look, at the end of the day, there are some mixers out there that are like, I don't give a shit if it sounds amazing on a Sony smartphone. I don't care. Some mixers don't even care if it sounds good in mono. They're like, fucking some boys do, and girls and thems and theys do care about mono. Again, it's just all translation, and it's something that when you get to the level that me and Ed are now, where we're very comfortable with our mixes and we feel that we can definitely churn out good mixes, it's all about, right, how do we get that consistency? And that's something that we'll be experimenting with, no doubt, over the next fucking 6 to 12 months. And I do think the way that me and Ed go on this journey, that we will get to a point where we will find the solutions and we will find the right translation tools for us, and we'll find that our mixes translate over certain sources. On my part, I just know it's laziness. And it is, because there's nothing worse when you think you've got your mix sounding banging, and then you go to something and you're like, it's not sounding that good. I'll just leave it. No, like, have tools that you trust. Don't get distracted. And yeah, let's have a discussion, open discussion about it. And yeah, there you go, Ed. That's my waffle done. There you go, 50 minutes in. Yeah, that's a little decent length of topic there. It'll probably be heavily edited. Knowing Ed, taking out all the waffle that didn't need to be there. But yes, anything you want to say, Ed, before we pop off?
I didn't realise we'd started recording.
Fuck you.
Is Paul going to walk out again? Is that
no? I am mature.
Yeah, I do want to reiterate that we do appreciate everyone's comments on the mixes, because we both of us do genuinely consider everyone's comments, and then we do ask, what were they listening on? And a lot of you say, which is great. If you forget to say, let us know, because we are interested. So we appreciate the comments, we take them on board, we consider them, and then we consider if there's something we need to act on, or there are some things that, I just put down to taste differences, genre awareness differences, but that's all part of the learning curve. And, we do research this stuff in the background and chat endlessly, and even chat for an hour online.
Yep.
and publish it based on comments. So we do appreciate the comments. What I would say is, though, for people who don't do YouTube, is the interesting kind of dichotomy of this situation is that we put ourselves out there, which is quite a brave thing to do. I think we should be proud about that, Paul, because there's very few people who are putting their mixes online. There's YouTubers who don't put their mixes online.
Big time,
talking about YouTube. We are putting them out there, very much with the caveat that we know we're not incredible yet. We are on our journey to becoming full-time mix engineers, which includes learning. And if you go back and listen to the stuff we were doing in the Produce Like a Pro days, holy shit, we've come a long way.
Oh, we'll have, big time.
But the interesting thing with the comments is, obviously everyone feels like they want to find the one thing they can find that's wrong, which is good, because there is always something wrong, like I've said, different perspectives. So what's interesting for us is that we don't just get one comment from one person finding the one thing they found wrong in the mix. We get multiple comments from multiple people on multiple mixes, and that can be a bit of a handful, but that makes us tougher eggs, I like to think.
Yeah.
So please leave your comments below, like, share the podcast where possible. We do want this to grow, because we do get positive feedback that we're helping people. Thank you to DistroKid, who are continuing to sponsor this podcast. Sign up and get 30% off your first year subscription using the VIP link below. If you're listening to us online, feel free to watch us and our ugly faces on YouTube. And if you're just watching on YouTube, you can listen to us anywhere if you don't have YouTube Premium. It's been emotional. Good episode, I think, Paul. I enjoyed that. Always good to chat with you about these things during the week. I mean, what did I get today? I got a 6-minute voice note and an 8-minute voice note from Paul.
Rabbit hole.
We used to chat on Facebook, and I said, mate, we need to go to WhatsApp so I can put you on double time. I can only manage 1.5 because I can't understand it otherwise.
Aye, no way. And on that bombshell, we'll leave it at that. My name's Paul Third. That's Ed Thorne. I'll see you next week. We've got to be thumb thing again, look.